This is the part of your brain that causes you to have fight or flight, which we know what that is, right? If something dramatic happens, like a toddler hears like a bookcase toppling, they're gonna pull, they're gonna walk or run away, hopefully, because they're hearing like a crashing sound and they're gonna try to get it. So that's fleeing. And if it was like something, like if they, like maybe an older siblings trying to poke their eye with something, they would either fight back or they would, move away. So that's that fight or flight. So either like defend themselves or they're just go the other way and get out of that situation. So these are all the different regular responses. And if you have secure attachment, you would be able to react to these things in a way that made sense. Kind of like a hot stove, you would pull your hand away from it. But oftentimes when people have been through neglect or trauma, like physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological warfare, they don't react in a way that makes sense. They could do something like emotionally shut down, where it's like they're near a hot surface, and if they touch it, instead of reacting like should try to get away from it, they might be so numbed out and just not even paying attention, like emotionally kind of dead, that they're not connecting that they need to do some, take an action. Okay, they're just up in their head. They're not physically connected to their mind or their thinking space, because your reasoning brain, you don't get that till later, and that's up here in your temporal lobe. Back here is more like your vision area, and deep in your brain is pituitary gland, and that's got to do more with like rest and your adrenal systems, your sleep systems. There's all different parts of the brain that affect different actions. Okay, so we already talked about secure. Anxious would be somebody who they just need a lot of validation. They need a lot of verbal, communication that makes them feel that they are not going to be abandoned or left, and that they are understood and that they are noticed. They want attention. They have a tendency in arguments to pursue the other person. Like if one person goes in another room to get away from them because they don't want to argue, they will definitely go after them or call their phone a million times. Or like they're basically, their thing is something has caused their system to be dysregulated when they were younger. So perhaps they had a parent who had drug or alcohol abuse, or somebody who, was abusive on some level, so that they were scared of them. And so they're basically just need reassurance all the time that they're not in that same situation. Because what happens if you don't heal these things, you end up either stuffing your feelings and ending up with a physical disease. A lot of times for women, that would be they're gonna get all kinds of things wrong with their bodies because they're stuffing their feelings. So a lot of times, I'm not gonna name off all these diseases, but they'll get things that inflammation, or they might have more prone to MS or lupus or all these different things, just because adrenal problems, because they are always in a kind of, not a nervous state, but a hyped up state. The hyper arousal. Okay, so like they're constantly, like an anxious person is nervous, they're jittery. It's almost like they just had some espresso. They're really wanting like for someone to tell them it's okay. They can't figure that out for themselves. Or even if they do think it, it's like the way their mind and body are set up, they're not aligned. So it's like these two things know, these two systems have different answers, but they're not communicating with each other. Where somebody who's really fully integrated with their mind, body, spirit would really be able to take that in, and it would make sense, like how they felt and how they reacted would correlate. Whereas if you have anxious attachment, it's very rocky. A lot of people have borderline personality disorder, which is usually hard to detect because it has a lot of hallmarks of just behavior problems, really. So sometimes it's especially with like a teenager or a young adult, it'd be hard to navigate what it is, or somebody who had addictions, if that was what was going on, or if it was those things going on. So like somebody who has BPD, I mean, I don't like to use the word dramatic or moody, but they're very like, let's just say they switch very quickly from one emotion to another with very little transition time. They also crave to be in relationships. However, the way they behave in them can be super confusing and a lot of times drive the other person away. Like they may obsessively call, much like the anxious attachment, but this is different. Where anxious attachment, they're more like they just want the validation. Somebody who has BPD might want physical touch. They might want, some kind of physical act to prove to them in that second, like they can't wait for the validation. They have to have it right then. They might drive to a partner's workplace and, demand that they show them some kind of token of, that they're not going to leave them. They might ask that question like a million times. I mean, like they're very aggressive they're very demonstrative in their fear of being left. Whereas somebody who's anxiously attached, it's not so much demanding physical presentation of that. It's more like verbal or just, wording. Then BPD, what else about it? Oftentimes there's more sexual behavior, much like with borderline too. And there's insomnia. There's trouble sort of with their schedule. They're just kind of all over the place. There's trouble with regulating their emotions. There's trouble with a lot of inferiority. They usually have a very low their self-esteem is extremely low. They're not getting their confidence from the actions that they do, because usually they're in and out of relationships, in and out of jobs, in and out of so many things that they really don't stay anywhere long enough to sort of get that long-term gratification of their achievement. So that's another hallmark of it. It's honestly very prevalent, and it's also, I think, really not enough emphasis on. I mean, it truly is usually from something that's happened to them earlier in life, but it can really cause like great havoc, because the things that they most want are the things that they're driving away. I guess the number one thing is they don't have a strong center. Like they're not centered in themselves. They don't have like a calm place where they really know who they are. They don't have like an identity that's really cemented. They also could be prone to suicidal thoughts or to cutting or anything, any kind of excessive self-harm, or talk about it. a lot in a way that is almost reoccurring. Like it's like they'll go get help and then they'll just go do it again in a month or weeks or whatever. So it's a real repetitive, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Somebody who there's really two kinds of the more withdrawn or avoidant type of personalities. These oftentimes, not always, but can be more male-centered because, like, you know, in society, males are considered to be stoic, or they don't have a lot of emotion, they control themselves, they don't talk a lot about their feelings. So in some ways this can be a real disadvantage because stereotypical labels for men that would make them be admired, these people could be talked about in that way, but then when it really comes down to it, it's really just, you know, they're just shut down. They're just not emotionally present. They're just kind of vacant in the depth of their personality. It's like a very surface level, but the feelings can be extremely deep. Like, it's almost like their feelings are more colorful and have more depth than they're actually what they show the world, except when they get angry, and then they can display a lot of drama there. The fearful, disorganized type person, this disorganized is kind of just saying that it's not disorganized in like somebody who like has a messy room or something. It's not like the opposite of OCD. It's more like somebody who has characteristics of the avoidant, and then they also have characteristics of the anxious. So it's a real trip to deal with because they're coming, you know, they can be very like anxious, controlling, like all over you, and then turn it around, and then when you do try to give them the attention that they're really pushing for, or, you know, they can be very controlling, then they just act like they don't care, they don't take it in. Like, it's like they turn on you and they're just kind of like, they actually are afraid of intimacy and don't like it, but they crave, it's a very strange, it's like they crave the attention, but they can't really receive it, if that makes any sense. Like, have you ever seen, like, this is like just a superficial example, but like sometimes people, certain type of person might be very, like a people pleaser, might be very generous gift giver, but then when it's their turn to receive something from someone else, even if it's just a quick compliment, they might be very uncomfortable, almost embarrassed, almost like they don't want to be on display as, like, you know, they don't like being seen receiving things. It's like they have almost like a guilt or dislike of public displays of affection, or like there's something about it that's unsettled. Okay, that is the disorganized. Okay, then the last one would be the true avoidant, who dismissive avoidant. So this is somebody who is, I think, the most difficult one, in my opinion, but that's just because I'm a very, like, extrovert, so I wouldn't like to deal with this. They're not very expressive. They tend to be people who, when they were children and they wanted to engage with their parents or their family, like if they had siblings, they wanted to maybe share things with them that they were excited about, or dreams or thoughts they have, or they have things they want to, you know, they want to have a connection with somebody, and that person might discipline them and be like, you know, hateful, or just brush them off, like, I don't have, you know, like, go to your room, just go play. You know, like they're just they're always met with like cold or discipline without love, like just punishment, punitive environment without love. So they kind of grow up where they don't have, like, part of being a little kid and learning from the people who are raising you is you learn how to behave. Like, you learn your moral core, really, from the people who are taking care of you. I mean, like, yeah, you go to school, yeah, you have friends. I mean, this does change when they're teenagers, of course, but, or go to college, but, or a young adult getting their first job that's professional. But for the most part, it's like you get these cues in society from people interacting with each other. So if you have somebody who's avoiding all physical contact, they're always alone, they're always just doing hobbies by themselves, or this might be like the stereotypical kid who just wants to play video games alone. You know, they do not want to like wear a headset and communicate with other friends while they're doing it. It's like they actually don't grow that ability to learn about how to get on a sports team. Like, how do you negotiate, you know, good feelings and bad feelings? How do you, you know, if you're waiting to be picked, like, what do you know, like all those things that like sort of form your character. It's like they're missing all of that. And like the generations now are like super in trouble for this kind of thing because they're not being forced to kind of have icebreakers. Like my generation, we always had a lot of one-on-one time or group time with each other because we didn't have anything else to do. There were no devices. There was, you know, not that many TV channels. Well, I'm not that freaking old, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there was less things to get distracted from. So you ended up having more people time, really, you know. So if you don't grow up around that, you can then, when you're forced to do it, have a ridiculously hard time figuring out what you're supposed to. Like, this would be like people who only want to text and don't want to talk on the phone. It's like they haven't ever really spent a lot of time doing it, so it makes them uncomfortable because they don't really know the unconscious, like, social norm of the body language, like all the things you do and say. Like, they're just not relaxed. They just are tense. So it's like they avoid it. So those are really the styles, I would say. Not the fearful, but the dismissive, avoidant. They can also, when they do interact, they can be very kind of critical, or not say a lot, or if they do say something, they might be terse or negative, so that, you know, it makes the other person not want to try again with them. So the thing about them is usually they tend to like more to be alone. So it's like, well, no foul, no harm. What is that? No harm, no foul. Like, they didn't actually want a relationship anyway. Whereas with the fearful avoidant, it's kind of a really sad situation because they actually really crave the connection. They actually really need to have physical and emotional relationship with somebody, or, you know, some kind of reciprocal thing. But it's like they're so overcome by overthinking and pressure, and they fold under pressure with intimacy, but they want it so badly. So it's like kind of like the borderline. So it's like you almost feel like that would be harder because it's like being, you know, outside of an event, you know, looking through the fence, and you want to be there in the bleachers, like watching the game, but you're stuck. You don't have the money to go in, so you're stuck just hanging around outside and hearing it, but you can't actually participate. kind of like a metaphor for that. All right, I was gonna go over some literature books, but I think I'm gonna do that in another one because it must get too long. All right, thanks, bye.